I want to tell you about one of the most generous people that I know. It feels like every time I turn around, he's doing something costly to bless our community. A couple times a year, he goes down to the local coffee shop, or one of the local coffee shops, and he opens up a tab for any teacher in the entire Livermore School District. All day long, any teacher who comes and shows up and shows their school ID, whether he's there or not, they get a free coffee. See, my friend spent the first years of his adult life as a teacher, and so he knows just how hard and often thankless the work can be. And at one point, he left teaching to start his own business, but he won't let himself forget where he came from. And he doesn't do this just with coffee, but he will open up a tab at a local restaurant. And again, teachers are invited all day long to come and grab a drink. Every December, he partners with local business owners to put on this huge fundraiser where all of the money that gets raised goes to provide Christmas for families in need. These are just some of the big public things that I can see him do in any given year. It's like, who knows what else is happening kind of behind the scenes. But day to day, he just has this reputation among anybody who knows him for being a genuinely good guy. He is kind to people that he interacts with. He's known for being honest in his work. He takes on mentees all the time and invests in them, teaching them what he's learned in starting his own business. And in encounters with him, you leave him feeling like you really matter. He knows your name, he remembers details about you, and he just is always looking to serve. And if you were to ask why he does all of this, he'll tell you how grateful he is for so many things, that this is the kind of person he wants to be. And if you then asked him how he's become this kind of person, it's fascinating. He'll talk to you about his morning routine. Most mornings, for more than a decade now, he wakes up early to spend a little time in silence, a little time meditating on important truths. He takes a little bit of time to look forward to his day, to plan out how he's going to make a difference. And he just sort of imagines or pictures himself accomplishing some of the things that, in his mind, a good person does. He then exercises, spends some time reading or learning something, and he'll write out some thoughts or plans for the day. He takes time for this every day because he trusts that this is going to help him become the kind of person that he wants to be. Ask him about Jesus, and he will tell you that Jesus is the GOAT, the greatest of all time, the greatest person who ever lived. He's pro-Jesus. But there is a limit to his interest in Jesus. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. To the one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. From the one who takes your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you. From the one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. lend, expecting nothing in return. This is the limit. This is where Jesus goes too far for my friend. This is where Jesus becomes impractical, irresponsible, and maybe even a little dangerous. Love is good. In all of the ways that my friend sees Jesus loving the outcast and serving and doing good, my friend is inspired. Kindness is important, but sacrifice. Are we really supposed to let ourselves get taken advantage of? Are we really supposed to enable people in their selfishness? Are we really supposed to give to people who are ungrateful and don't appreciate what we're doing for them? Are we really supposed to be kind to the wicked? This is where my friend draws the line. And if I'm just really candid with you, he has a point. There's a lot of wisdom in what he's saying. Talking this through, my friend says this. He goes, I like giving to people. And when I give to someone who is ungrateful for it, someone who misuses the gift I gave them, someone who demands more from me, or whatever it is, it impacts my heart. He goes on to say, I find myself regretting the gift I just gave. Or next time I find myself wanting to be more selective about who I might help, or maybe I just find myself wanting to stop giving at all. If it's not going to be appreciated, I have no interest in it. Do you recognize these thoughts, these feelings? Have you ever felt this? This is so real and honest. And I think there are a lot of us who, when we're honest, we feel this exact same way. It's kind of incredible then that Jesus seems to have anticipated these concerns exactly. Because what does he go on to say right after he lists all of these things that they were called to do? His first thing is he says, judge not. Condemn not. Forgive. And give. Jesus seems to perfectly understand that rejection hurts. That rejection can harden our hearts. Like when Jesus convinces a couple of his disciples to go into a Samaritan village and to share with them the good news that the kingdom has come. And Jesus' disciples, they're Jewish. And this is a Samaritan village. And the Jews and the Samaritans were ancient enemies. But the disciples, they go, they obey Jesus. They go in, they're willing to be bold and to do what Jesus asked them to. And they share the message. Jesus has come, the kingdom has come. And you know what the town does? They shrug. No thanks, we're good. And how do Jesus' disciples respond? They ask Jesus if they can call down fire from heaven on them. They want their preaching to be received. They brought a gift. It's good news. I don't want to preach if people aren't going to be appreciative of it. Now, we might not get close to death threats, but when we've done something for someone, or offered something, or given something that was meant to be a blessing and a gift, but it gets rejected, or it becomes something else, it gets used in some sort of twisted, distorted way, this can mess with us. It can mess with our hearts. And so Jesus is ready. He anticipates this. The only way that we can become the kind of people who can love enemies, who can do good to those who hate us, who can bless those who curse us, the only way we can become these kind of people is if we are taking care of our hearts. Maybe a better way to say it is if we are letting God take care of our hearts, if we are letting the Holy Spirit transform our hearts. And there is some preventative work that we can do to care for the state of our hearts. We have to practice not judging people. We have to refuse habitually to not condemn others for their selfishness or whatever. We have to practice forgiving people who have wronged us. None of these come naturally to us. These are things that we have to do and do again and practice and grow in. And Jesus says, no matter what we're feeling, no matter what is happening to our hearts, give. Keep giving. Constantly giving. Judge not. Condemn not. Forgive. And give. This is how Jesus can let himself be put on a cross and then pray, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. This is what we call, what I referred to last week as consequential faith. Remember last week, I asked the question, what difference does Jesus make in the way that you are living each day? What are the consequences of choosing to follow Jesus? Here is where Jesus himself tells us exactly the kind of difference he makes. This passage that we just heard from Natanya and Whitney tells us this is what a life that trusts Jesus looks like. And he's helpful in this way. He narrows down his list to 3 really clear examples: loving people, doing good to people, and lending your money to people. And notice, none of these examples is about personal piety. None of them are about praying more, making sure that you are closer with God. It's interesting, right? They are actually all about our relationship with our neighbors. It's almost as if our relationship with our neighbors can limit our closeness to God or expand it. Jesus has come in part to change the way that we interact with our neighbors. And it's interesting the way he does it. He sets up 2 distinct categories of people in this message. So he addresses you, right? Not necessarily us, but the first audience. But we hear the you as followers of Jesus, people who have shown up and said, Jesus, teach me, speak to me. He's speaking to us, those who might want to follow him. But then he contrasts the you with sinners. And I don't know what comes to your mind when you use that word, when you refer to groups of people as sinners. You can hear it in my voice, right? Sinners. It has a negative connotation. It feels heavy. But notice how Jesus describes sinners. He describes them actually as pretty quality folks. Right? 3 times we find out that, well, sinners, they know how to love. They're actually good at what you might call reciprocal love. Right? If they've been loved, they are totally capable of loving you right back. The same with doing good. Like, we don't typically think of the way that the word sinner is used, somebody, a sinner, being good or being capable of doing good. But Jesus says sinners are totally capable of doing good to those who do good to them. So they can do good. And then with lending, right? Sinners can be quite generous with their money. There are all sorts of laws in other places, in other cultures, requiring you to lend, telling you you must lend, because that's not necessarily an obvious or easy thing to do. Well, sinners, they can lend. They share it with people who are in need. Now, right, they expect to get paid back, but that sort of makes sense rationally. There are all sorts of risks involved with giving your money to somebody and hoping they'll pay you back. But to lend to be willing to lend is a positive. So just think for a second about how Jesus is talking about sinners. He's describing them as loving, generous do-gooders. Jesus is showing us what it looks like to judge not and condemn not, what this looks like in practice. And, right, compare this with how you've heard others, maybe yourself, talk about sinners. Maybe a particular group of sinners. Maybe you've heard someone rail against sinners. I mean, all I have to do right now is open my email and open any kind of campaign letter from Christians who have aligned themselves with a particular political party. And I just notice the way they talk about the other party, right? It like drips with judgment and condemnation. Those wicked, those immoral people who are destroying our country. That's how most of us hear sinners. Those terrible people. I have a proposal for you. When you hear a brother or sister in Christ, a Christian, start talking or start ranting about a particular group of sinners, just stop them for a second and say, I'll listen to the rest of your rant if you will just start by naming a couple good things about them. Just, what is something of God in them? Just start there. And then I'll listen to everything else you have to say, right? Because if they can't, then it actually reveals something about the faith that they say they have. And if they can, it's kind of amazing what happens, how a conversation changes when we begin to see God at work in a person. It's amazing what happens when we humanize people, what that does to our view of them. Jesus describes sinners as people capable of love, goodness, and generosity. That's a bit counterintuitive for us. But he does make a distinction between these sinners and those who follow him, those who are listening to him teach, right? Because while sinners love, while sinners do good, while sinners lend to others, those who follow Jesus, he says, go beyond these things. That's kindergarten. Everybody learns how to do those things. There is like a base level of love, goodness, and lending that is common among all people, among people who are far from God. Our theological tradition would just call this common grace. The scriptures say that it rains on the just and the unjust, so we shouldn't be surprised that people far from God actually show signs that God has been there and that God might be pursuing them. So there's a base level. Love, goodness, lending. And then there is a quality of love and goodness and giving that we're told truly reflects the character of God seen in Jesus. And Jesus tells us what the Most High is like. What does he say? He says he's kind to the ungrateful. And he is kind to those who are evil. For our Father is merciful. Our Father is merciful, so that when we look at Jesus, when we see Jesus on the cross, this is what we are seeing, right? We are seeing God's love for sinners. We're seeing God's generosity for the ungrateful. We are seeing God's goodness for those who are evil. When we see Jesus on the cross, we are seeing God's mercy for those who deserve judgment. When Jesus tells us that we are to be merciful because our Father is merciful, he's just reminding us that God has been merciful to you. that God has been merciful to you. We have received God's mercy. God chose, not because of anything that we did, but out of his grace and his mercy to bring us into his family. You might be noticing a theme over the last couple weeks, right? The last 2 weeks, I have come back to this again and again, that we are loved and we have been made children of God because there is no more important thing for us to know and believe and walk in than that we are dearly loved children of God. We are sons and daughters of the Most High God. This is the starting place for everything. And this is why Jesus can say, you are living as children of the Most High when you love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. Because you and me, we were loved while we were God's enemies. Because God's goodness came to us while we hated God. Because our curses were met with blessing. And because Jesus prayed for us while he hung on the cross that we put him on. God gave us the other cheek and his tunic also. He gives us more than we deserve. And so we, as grateful children, offer to others what we have been given. We pass on the love that is transforming us. I want to tell you kind of a cool story, and I might embarrass her, but next Sunday afternoon, our friend Curtis is putting on a fundraiser. And if you know anything about Curtis, you know that she really enjoys running. And so her fundraiser is, surprise, surprise, a running race. She is able to run, and she's good at running. And so in her experience of this, her gratitude for being able to run, she wants to help others run. And she's raising money for an organization that supports kids with special needs, kids who want to participate in athletics like she gets to. And she's putting some of her own money in, and she's creating awareness for this cool organization. And I just have to confess, I don't have a word from the Lord about this, but I could hear him saying, who benefits if you post about your favorite causes on social media? For even sinners do that. But show up and sacrifice and give generously and actually do something for the people you care about. This is what God did for you. So you will be a child of your Father. You know, I spent a lot of time on middle school campuses, and I think middle school students are fantastic. I see their love and their goodness and their generosity all the time, even the worst of them. There's some rough ones. But I also know that there are very few middle schoolers raising money to help other kids do the things that they enjoy doing. And this doesn't mean Chris is better than anyone, but it is a sign that God is at work transforming her with his love. Her faith in Jesus has consequences. Those consequences show up as a cost to her, but also then a blessing to others, specifically people who might have nothing to give her in return. I think that there is a general temptation that we experience to settle for the common love, the common goodness, and the common generosity that is accessible to everyone. We love. We do good. We give. But something doesn't quite sit right when we look at our lives and then look at the lives of some of the very best people we know, people who aren't following Jesus. My friend from the beginning. And we can't help but notice that our lives really don't look all that different. That we're doing many of the same things. Our priorities are mostly the same: family, work, recreation, and retirement. And when we're really honest, these friends who are living pretty good lives might even be outdoing us in their discipline and their devotion, and maybe even sometimes in their love and their goodness and their generosity. And it does confront us with this question, does Jesus actually make a difference in our lives? I heard Jack in the back with an amen. Yes, Jesus does make a difference in our lives, huh, buddy? This is the same question that Jesus posed 2,000 years ago, right? He says, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and you do not do what I tell you to do? Is Jesus actually making us into the people capable of this kind of life? I want to finish this morning by paraphrasing a quote I read this week. And so actually, John, can I ask you to do something? It's not in the sermon, but it's the slide that was up at the very beginning of service. So it's a little bit long. I want you to be able to follow along. It is possible, got it wrong already. It is popular and easy to talk about loving strangers and welcoming the other. Having a loving attitude is not enough. Being firmly committed to welcoming people is not enough. These do not actually challenge us. They do not transform our loyalties. What does change us? What will transform our loyalties? Actual acts of love toward particular strangers. You cannot simply discuss love for strangers or think about love for strangers, but there must be actual strangers in your life, family, church, and community who appear to have little to offer you. It is even better if you do not like them or what they stand for. And then love them, do good to them, and give to them, expecting nothing in return. And Jesus said, everyone who comes to me and hears my words and does them, I will show you what he is like. He's like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when a flood arose, the stream broke against that house and could not shake it because it had been well built. As children of the Most High, let's delight in doing our Father's will. Not merely talking about it, and we practice this morning this loving obedience by doing what Jesus commanded. We come around a table together where we obey his command. Do this in remembrance of me.